Hi everyone, welcome back
Hi.
to Haunted Hearsay. I'm back here. I'm in Donegal. We have another guest with us tonight, also from Donegal. We have Ben down in Dublin, in the capital. Hi Ben.
Hi, how are you?
And Regina's very kindly joined us from Letterkenny. So,
Hi.
hi Regina, how are you?
Hi, everybody. How are you? How are you, Carly?
Not too bad at all. So, how have things been this week for you all?
Okay, for me, just same old lockdown as
I know.
usual.
How are you dealing with the lockdown? You're stuck at homeschooling as well, aren't you, Regina?
Yeah, I have Cosmos doing most of the homeschooling.
Oh yeah,
Banshee's character on the planet. So I'm learning a few things myself.
that's cool. Yeah, yeah, that's a cartoon that the company I work for sells. So
Oh,
About the
very good.
planets and all. It's very good. It's handling about 40% of the homeschooling. And we've got Zoom meetings now tomorrow with this class. So I hope that go all right. I don't know how much he's going to pay attention to it or not. He'll be glad to see his wee friends. He said
Mhm.
friends today. He misses his friends.
But
Um,
aren't we lucky that we have this technology now?
I know, and everyone's
You know,
kind of used
what
to
did we
using
do?
it now
yeah, exactly.
and
Everybody
watching it.
is. Regina, I believe you have a story or two that you're going to share with us this week.
I have a couple of stories about it. I've actually gathered some since it was a Banshee, and I was talking to
Hmm.
some older relatives about it. And apparently, I have the Banshee in one side of the family and the Knox, and they're supposed to be different. The three Knox, they're supposed to
Now,
Uh,
be.
Ben would know a bit more about this than me
I,
because Ben, well, did
I've
you not
I've
talk
not
to?
heard of Knox before now, so that's
Oh,
interesting. I
no way!
No, yeah, no, just things like, is this in terms of like, oh, it's like sound that's heard?
Yeah. It's usually I'll just be freaky now, dude. Can you hear that?
Yeah,
Yes,
Just like three knocks,
because I know
and
I know somebody that hears bells.
yes, that's what I meant. I was referencing to.
Ah, yes,
It's just different signs. People get different signs, but I've
yeah,
heard of the knocks. I have heard of that. Well, do you mind because we showed Ben's film again, and then Ben and I went over talking over the film again to give people a better insight because everybody has a different interpretation of the Banshee. So
mm.
that's why we wanted you to come on and tell us your story as well.
The Banshee, a Wailing woman. Uh, I think she's an old Irish. I don't know much about her. She to warn of a passing. Well, my great grandfather, so this is my mother's grandfather, not a superstitious man, very man's man. He went out to a shed. I think they lived in Newton Stewart, like his out barn or something, because he thought he could hear a trapped animal and he could hear crying and wailing. He
mm,
went out with his lantern, tilly lamp, whatever. This was years ago, and he couldn't get enough light, so he came in to his wife and got another lantern as well. And when he moved to one side of the shed, this wailing and this noise would move, and so he went and checked all round outside the sheds. It was like a child crying or an animal or something. He must have said to my mother. So he met a neighbour coming running and asked him was he all right because he was in such a panic, and he said he was off to get the doctor, and their neighbour's son died that night. He thought this was the wailing of the banshee.
yeah, like
That's what he thought it
a
was.
omen. It's interesting. A few things you said there kind of brought back memories for me. One of them was the Tilly lamps, because when we made, it was impossible to find a Tilly lamp that works still. So many people had the lamps, but all across Donegal, but none of them worked. It was really hard.
Really?
Yeah,
You never asked me
did you
about a
have
telly lamp.
working Tilly lamps?
My
Oh,
mother has two of them.
we spent like a long time sourcing. We got four in the end for the shoot. They're in the film. But yeah.
When we first moved to Donegal from Glasgow, we were here during the summer, and my parents decided that we're going to stay in Ireland, and we were staying in my father's family home, which was an old thatched cottage. It was just used as a holiday home, and the only electricity, we didn't have electricity. There was no running water, no electricity, and you had to go out to a wee shed outside for the toilet. But it was tilly lamps.
Mm.
And my mother just had such a fondness for them. And I don't think they're the same telly lamps that she had in the thatch house, but she has too, with you put your paraffin in, and as long as you've got your
Yeah,
wick. I
the
can
oil.
remember going down to like Murray Warish's shop in Mulladuff and getting a bit of wick. You had to go in and you would get so
Mhm.
much wick and getting your paraffin to take it up home. Murray Warish's shop, by the way, is the one when John Friel wrote the play Philadelphia, Here I Come.
Mhm.
That was what it
Oh,
was based loosely on. Was that?
When the pandemic's over, I recommend everyone to go over to that part of Donegal. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
Mulladuff's beautiful. I mean, don't get me wrong, all of Donegal's
All of
beautiful,
Donegal is
but
beautiful.
Mulladuff has that real quaint magic about it.
Yeah.
There's lots of fairy stones. And you just know it because you can feel them. You can just feel it. There's just a magic about Mulladuff.
Mhm.
Sorry, Regina,
Sorry.
we're terrible
Just,
for doing this
well, this
soundtrack.
is all part of it, really, isn't it? Well, the other thing I was
This
going to
is-
say is the animal sounds. When we did our research and we went around, we met lots of people. A lot of people said that it could be compared to like foxes or animals crying or that kind of thing, but it never was, which
mm,
I thought was very interesting that you brought that up.
mm. Yeah,
Um,
he
There's
thought.
lots of evidence of it down through the centuries in Ireland. It didn't start with one or two people.
mhm.
It's a common thread in Irish myth and folklore. But there's a
And
lot of
Scottish,
people
but
that,
there-
yes,
there's a
absolutely.
variation.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not-
it could very well be a Celtic thing,
I think
you
so
know,
because
but it's,
in Scotland it's associated with rivers more. That's why we had the river at the beginning of
yeah,
it.
it's definitely, that thousands and thousands and thousands of people down through the centuries have claimed to have heard something, and then that preceded a death or
Hmm.
deaths in the community, but it was always usually somebody within the vicinity.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying there was something else then on your father's side, was there?
No, on my mother's other side, on
Mhm.
her grandfather on the other side, then her father's father was very ill, and they lived in, my mother and all the family lived in England, and his two brothers lived in England, and of course their home was uh, Newton Stewart, I think it was, or Sion Mills, and they'd been home, but their their father picked up, so they just left again, and the granny said, I won't send for you unless I think it's really, you know, really whatever. And he was in, I was going to say in watching the TV, but probably not. He was in the sitting room with all the kids. Maybe they had a TV, I don't know, like the 50s. In the sitting room with the kids anyway, and he heard a knock on the door. They were all there. She was there. She remembers this. And he went out and there was nobody there. And he assumed it was kids or something. And he came back in, and yeah, there was another knock, and they all heard it. Went out again, nobody there. He checked, for the string on the door knocker. Anyway, he stood in the hall, in the glass in their window, and he waited. And there was another knock with nobody there. And he rang his two brothers. Um, he didn't ring because it was a telegram. I don't know. Anyway, he got in touch with his two brothers that lived there, probably not far away from him, and when they were in England. And they says, we better go home. So they left to go home. And shortly after that, when he had left, a telegram had arrived from his mother saying, yeah, you have to come. And he got home. They got home and they were there half an hour or so, and the father died. So
Wow.
they were just there in time
They were
before he
lucky
died.
they were there to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Do
His
you know what's a bit disconcerting about that now when I think in it? Today's Tuesday. On Sunday evening in here in the house, as I say, I've been decluttering for the last several days, and it's very good for the soul, by the way, to get rid of
yeah.
stuff that I've been holding on to for years. But I digress. I was in the living room. Now, you both know that I'm hard of hearing, but
Yeah.
I heard a rap, three knocks, and I got up and I went out and I answered the door, and there was nobody there. So I went to the back door, there was nobody there. So I went down to the bedroom and I says, Jamie, were you knocking on the door? He says, I, of course I was. I says, no, were you? He says, no, of course I wasn't. I says, I genuinely just heard someone knocking on. So I went back out the front door, and that's how sure I was that I heard it. But I'm just a bit afraid now in case that happens again.
How soon? Well, It was straight away.
I think it's usually within the week.
But you also have a quite tuned in psychic ability as well, so you
And
never.
I do have a lot of
It might not be associated with this, but I've actually never heard of knocks being a sort of precursor to a death before. That's interesting.
So they've
Yeah,
been.
that's me one on me.
My mother had another experience when I was young. She doesn't remember it much. I don't know. I think she just doesn't want to. But we had relatives staying over, so I was up in my sister's room for the night, and we had the relatives in my parents' room, and my mum was in my room, and my dad was on the couch. And she came up to me very early in the morning, and everyone else had kind of been hungover, but I was young. So she came up to chat to me. I suppose I'd have been awake or whatever. And she said she heard 3 wee knocks on the window. And she looked, and there was nobody there. And some of the relatives and things would have had a habit of knocking me up to open the door if they were coming back after a few from the Pin Tavern, like, or the Swilly Inn, the local pubs, you know. And they would usually wake me up because, you know, no one would get on to them. So she looked out, and nobody. I was saying to her, it's probably, you know, this and that. Anyway, she keeps her wee Bible with all her, you know, dates in it, and it was that grandfather that heard the Banshee. It was his anniversary, and she just thought it was like, pray for me.
Wow.
It could just be someone's anniversary or something, Caroline. Like, mightn't be the number.
Well, you know, I did have a cousin that passed a few weeks ago.
Recently, yeah, actually,
Yeah,
that's
and
true.
it could even be that. I'm not going to let myself dwell on it. I'm going to tell you very quickly. By the way, there was one occasion that Regina was here with me. The two of us were here. We were having dinner, etc. Dinner and lots of wine. But we had a bit of a sing-song. Regina's a great one for writing songs. And so when she hears something, she'll record it. But she recorded me that night. And the one thing that had nothing to do with the singing, but the amount of orbs where I'm sitting now, in fact, exactly where I'm sitting now, I was surrounded with, you're not talking one or two, there was about half a dozen orbs.
Did you have a photo?
Yeah, she hasn't been able to find it though.
Well,
I had a 2.5 minute recording of it, and it was too long to send you.
Sorry? Well, I can take a still frame out of a video if you want, if that's. But if it's I don't know.
Caroline, what if you sing that song again? Do you think it might happen?
No, I'm not going to start.
Bring it on home, Sam Cooke. Go on. Go on.
I'd need wine. I'm still doing dry January at the moment.
I need the wine.
I'd need wine for that one, though, you know.
When we reconvene, we can do that.
Yes. On another occasion when we're celebrating the end of the pandemic, I'll sing a song.
Yeah, we'll to find the words.
But I do have another ghost story, but you know something, Ben, you're going to have to clarify this for me. I don't know if I've told it before.
Oh, go for it.
Hopefully it's not. It's I don't want to give the people's names because I didn't ask permission if I could tell the story, so I'm going to tell it without using their names. And it is people that I know, and it comes from a very credible source. But it happened back actually almost 40 years ago when a certain person was courting a girl that was here on holiday from Glasgow. And her holiday home was in Runnafast here in Donegal. And he lived in another part of Donegal. Anyway, long story short, he had taken her home that night. He had taken her out, obviously, for a drink or whatever, and he'd taken her home that night. And on his way back, coming through Runnafast, there had been a priest there at the time, and the priest at the side of the road waved him down. And he stopped and he's, "Can I help you, Father?" And he says, "I really, really..." Now this is 40 years ago, very little, you know yourself, here in Donegal, you know, limited traffic, limited cars. We did taxis were a very extravagant thing, etc. Thank God we're easier to reach now. But he said, I have a real family, whatever the words were, it was like, "I have a real family emergency and I need to get back to Glencolmkill." And he says, "Okay, I'll give you a lift." And the priest got in the car.
Quite far away from Runnafast.
Yeah, no, you're not talking like a mile or two. For anyone that's watching, Glencolmkill from Runnafast would be like an hour and a half driving. Mm-hmm. And he drove him there, and apparently the whole way down he was like mumbling away to himself, and You know, he was very agitated, and you know, so he didn't. The guy driving didn't really say an awful lot to him, but the guy driving would be a very quiet person anyway, more likely to speak when spoken to, if you know what I mean, especially by a priest. And he got to where he had to go in Glencolmkill, and he dropped him off. And he came home, and his mum and dad were actually waiting up for him. And it was like, "Where were you till this time of the night?" And he says, "Oh, sure, I met the priest coming. I was coming up from on a fast, whatever the priest's name was. I'd need to ask his name." And I gave him a lift. There was a bit of a family emergency or something in Glencolmkill. And they both looked at each other, and they says, "You couldn't have lifted that priest. He died this morning."
That morning, oh my God.
That morning. So obviously that
Well, that
spirit
was a
was,
family emergency then.
that was the spirit was obviously so disorientated and didn't know what was happening to it. But you know, he didn't know. He said he knew there was something weird about the whole thing, but he couldn't put his finger on it because he didn't believe.
Hmm.
And you know, he didn't believe in the
I got a big
paranormal. Didn't
shiver.
believe, yeah. So, and I mean, this comes from such a reliable source. If I can get him to tell the story himself, but you know, local businessman, and yeah,
Wow.
you're just you're an hour and a half in the car with him,
Yeah, wow.
and he died that morning. Imagine. And actually, that gave me shivers as well.
You know the lady that runs the Glencolmkill Folk Village. Again, I recommend everyone to go there after the pandemic. But Margaret Rose Cunningham. I wonder. I'd love to ask her if she has any stories of like ghost stories from the folk village,
Oh, there
because
must be.
everything's still intact, and you know
Yeah.
everything's still the way it was back in the day with the thatched cottages, and
Mm.
it's
There
really
must be. There's so much. There's so much history. Of course, there must be. You
mm,
know, even if it's, you know, there's different levels of haunting and different levels of paranormal and spirit activity.
mm,
And to be honest, I'm learning that from watching a lot of the American programs. Sort of the, you know, the different visuals. But I've also learned from watching a lot of the American ones, specifically, is when the, you know, ones that have gone around trying to debunk hauntings,
mhm.
and they're making this connection with magnetic activity. It's such a mouthful. They've made this connection with that and ley lines. Well, they didn't make that connection. They made the connection with hauntings or spiritual going ons that seem to be around a lot of magnetic activity. So it can be electricity. Sometimes it's causing similar types of phenomena. But a lot of people then seem to think, you know, with ley lines, well, I'm one of them, like, you know, I've spent a long time reading these things, that there seems to be extra activity where there's ley lines are crossed. It's like that black house in Cornwall, isn't it Cornwall? The
Yeah.
one that's like the most haunted house in the world. I mean, yeah, they don't even go into it. People don't live in it anymore. It's on a council estate, but it was
Oh,
built
that.
over a crossroads that used to be there several hundred years before,
Mhm,
and that used to have a hanging tree at this
mhm.
crossroads. But apparently, there are actually ley lines cross over here as well. So the house has like phenomenal poltergeist activity. People don't go in. Anyone, there's been film crews, there's been, you name it, documentary makers, the lot have gone into this house. They've made films about it,
Yeah.
horror movies.
You
I
told
know, I don't know them.
told me about it, and I went on YouTube, and it was just
Yeah,
flooded with people.
yeah, it's unbelievable just how many people have gone in and have visual and audio evidence
Mm.
of things happening in this house. It's like the most haunted place in the world. So I'm sure the Americans
That's
probably
probably
have
debatable.
bigger.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I'm sure they have a bigger and more haunted
Yeah.
place.
Everything's bigger and more haunted over there.
Everything's bigger.
Uh,
So have we any more stories for
well, I have
our whole 10 viewers?
enough time here as well. I have a story, and the reason why I want to bring it up is just because I know you guys probably haven't heard it.
Mhm.
It's become a kind of topic of conversation a bit on the internet, because another podcast mentioned it, and then they had a knock-on effect, loads of people talking about it. But I just want to run it by you. Maybe you're a bit older than me, so you might actually remember. So you know the country Zimbabwe. Also, I'll precursor this by it's not strictly paranormal. It's actually an alien story, but
Right, okay.
you know the country Zimbabwe, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, No, it's got its issues. Anyone I know from Zimbabwe actually has left Zimbabwe and gone to other
Well,
countries.
it's had issues for a long time. Formerly Rhodesia, and they split the country, and now it's two different countries.
The
And
economy collapsed
yeah,
completely.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Um, so anyway, in 1994, uh, there's this school. I don't know the exact name of the place, but it was 1994. It was Wednesday, the 14th of September. I'm just going to get the exact amount, but I think it's 62 children witnessed three UFOs arrive at their school. And the teachers weren't, and you're talking kind of rural school next to
Mm,
forest actually, and the forest they weren't allowed near because there were snakes and spiders and
mm,
that sort of thing. And the teachers, the report I read was that the teachers were having a kind of internal meeting, and the kids were allowed kind of run amok outside.
mm,
Um, and the basically there was hysterical crying, and they all ran out, and there was nothing there. There was no UFO, whereas in the teachers couldn't see any UFOs or anything. But when they had to console all the children that were in hysterics, and essentially 62 children said that they saw a little green man that got out of a UFO. There were three UFOs, and then so the head teacher was instantly skeptical, but very like concerned nonetheless, because like why are all the kids crying? And also another thing that I thought was quite interesting is that culturally, like I mean, there were white kids, there were black kids, there were kids from multiple ethnicities and different tribes and different villages and all sorts of things that went to the school that made up this, and different ages as well, between 6 and 12. Okay, they weren't all
mm,
babies.
Well, you're saying that. There's actually, you should go on now and check. It's a long time now since I've seen this, but I think it was back in the early 80s as well that there was UFOs seen above Moscow by thousands of people.
Mm,
There was photographs taken. It was in the local news. It was in the local papers. You know, is it the army? Was it UFOs? Was it the Americans? Was it, you know, nobody? That's worth looking up to have a wee. I mean, it's
mm,
seen by thousands, not by one or two, but
mm.
you know, by thousands and pictured, etc.
There's another one in Melbourne, Australia as well that I read about recently that was a school as well. So you have just so many witnesses. And also the military came to the school afterwards. This was in the 60s, I think. So,
Well, I do know. I mean, I knew a girl years ago in Donegal whose boyfriend at the time was in the American Army, and he was serving in Hawaii. He was stationed in Hawaii, where they had at that. Now, I think the Hubble telescope is obviously bigger now, but back then that was the biggest telescope they had, because they had more sightings. Apparently, the real hotspots in the world at the time were Hawaii and Cork.
oh, interesting.
Cork here in Ireland.
I've never heard that. But I've never
No,
looked.
well, I don't know how true the Cork, but they did have a phenomenal amount of UFO sightings, like unidentified flying, and that they just couldn't explain. And the same thinking probably, is it the Russians? Is it this? Is it that? You know, is
mm,
it, you know, that's to think we are such a tiny, tiny planet in such a vast universe. I
mm.
mean, we haven't even got outside. I genuinely think that everybody out there in the universe does drive past Earth with their windows closed, locked. You know, kids don't look, they're crazy down there.
Yeah, maybe. You never know. Like, I just, the final thing about this story, I just want to say is that the head teacher made them all draw what they saw. And because they're all from different cultures and different ages, it's quite unusual that everyone would draw
The
the,
same thing.
yeah. And then they interviewed all the older kids. So
Wow.
there's documentaries about it and everything, but it's kind of
Right.
back in the public zeitgeist now. Um,
Mm,
essentially, there's a lot of proof, and the guy that was reporting it originally, or studying it was a Harvard psychologist. But he got hit by a bus in London, unfortunately, when he was on a business trip from America to England, and died before the documentary that exists actually came out or whatever. But I mean,
Okay.
incredible
Yeah.
people, really, like Harvard, I think either a child psychologist or just a psychologist who teaches psychology, you know, like, or he was convinced. So
Well, it's not as far-fetched as some people would like to say it is. I mean,
yeah, I just feel a bit weird about the
statistically,
reality and how it would, if it was like, you know, if an alien came to Earth, it would just shatter what people's understanding of
you
it.
see, I know for some people it would, because they have a fixed idea. You know, there are some people that believe that God wrote the Bible himself. Let's not forget it was actually a Roman senator that commissioned, a Roman emperor that commissioned it. I don't get me wrong, I believe in God, but there's an awful lot of the sort of, you do get these people that think sort of
It's
it was
human influence.
Adam and Eve 5,000 years ago. That was the beginning. Before that, nothing existed. I believe in a God that created the heavens and the earth. I believe in a God that created everything.
The universe.
And I also don't think that a wee teeny weensy planet on the edge of the universe is the only one that's inhabited. I would have difficulty with that. I would imagine most scientists would have difficulty with that.
Yeah, well,
Even in our own galaxy.
there's various things, like there's a thing called the Fermi paradox and things that explain why. I think a lot of scientists believe that statistically there has to be, but then a lot of people also think that it's impossible for them to get here for various reasons.
Yeah, but that's only because, I mean, you've got to accept now that we only use 7/10 of our brain power, and that includes the smartest people in the world.
Probably less than 7.
There's sometimes you can train yourself into doing things, whether it's through a meditation or whatever. We know that's possible, that is possible, or whether there's through, sort of repetitive exercise, or we can train ourselves to do things, but naturally we only use 7/10 of our brain power. And with that, we assume that that's all anybody else could use as well. I mean, maybe we're like a fledgling.
Big heads, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you just get in different environments, different atmospheres.
There's all sorts of theories, like it might be like humans from the future coming back or whatever. So it's all there. You go. It's. I prefer things that are closer to home.
Evidence of spirits. Why wouldn't there be other life forms? Would be naive to think that we're the be all and end all.
Yes, I agree with you, Regina.
Your own verse.
I'd be open to it.
Yeah.
Well. There was something we were talking about the last time we were talking, kind of mentioned about the necklace that was used for black mass. Was I telling you about that?
No.
Well, I was asked to my mother gave it to my brother because she says, well, he can give it to his kids or whatever. He has 4 daughters. Keep it for whenever and be a real antique. But I've done more delving into it, and it turns out that it wasn't for black mass, it wasn't for circus purposes, it wasn't baby's teeth or anything like that. It's the same necklace that Mary, Queen of Scots, is wearing in the picture that's hanging in the museum in Edinburgh. And it's got this bad name because of the persecutions. People were hiding their crosses. So it's a really long necklace that would go in, and the cross is dangling at the end of it. So that's why it had 10 decades, 7 decades of 10 instead of 5 decades of 10. Is that it?
Well, in rosary beads, it's 1 decade, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where did your mum get the necklace?
She got it off. That's another interesting. Thank you for asking me. Right, the same lady who gave me this.
I can tell that's cursed.
You think so? The head's spinning.
Oh my God.
A lovely old lady, God rest her, Estelle, who had no living relatives left. She was the last, I think, of her life. She had a daughter. I don't know if her daughter died before her. I have no idea. But she lived on her own in Kerrykeelan. She was from the States. and her husband was an Irishman, and he was in the CIA, of something very glamorous and exciting anyway. But he died, so she was a widow living here in her own Kerry Keen. Her house is still there, you can pass it, but mum and dad had kind of befriended her, and she was the loveliest lady. She was very kind to me. This is one of the things that she gave to me, which I have to say, I think I wrapped it in a few Gansies and fired it at the back of the wardrobe. But it's been about for a lot. I just can't seem to shake it, you know. So here I was in at my mother's recently, and I'm tidying up, and what I come across. I don't think I even give it a name.
Wow.
And is that where the necklace came from?
Same lady that gave me my mother the necklace.
You know how old that doll is?
Well, I did do a bit of research on her. She's not the original. She's a copy of a doll. She's 1938, and she's a copy of some
Other
German company. I had looked at. She's got a Jewish mark on her neck, and she was made in Germany, and her numbers are 728. But I did look her up a while ago on the internet, and there's a lots of her because she's mass reproduced. Like, but she is really old, and yeah.
That's cool. I think we should do a show and tell every week.
Well, do you know you're going to say that? I've actually, not I, my mother has a collection of dolls. The last time she was in New York, and she was staying with a friend of hers who got them in a charity shop, and it's a collection of dolls that she thought would be nice for one of the kids. My mum landed home with these dolls, and to be honest, they would terrify you. It's wee boys and girls, and I'm going to get them. My mum was like, she kind of likes them.
Yeah.
But she had them all sitting out to show us one day, and we were all like, just gave us the heebie-jeebies. So I'm going to get them for Thursday, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to set them up and show you.
I've got something.
And you can tell me what you think.
Well, today I actually have something to show you as well, but it's kind of similarly to your doll, which actually isn't cursed. This is just.
What do you think my doll is?
Just something interesting.
Talking about you.
So this is. Can you guess what this is? Can you see it?
Is it a black egg, like an ostrich egg?
Yeah, but it's a black egg. It's a real egg. It comes from a real bird. It comes from an emu.
Oh, right, okay.
I think ostrich eggs are white, and this is a like a blown out emu egg from
Is it
Australia.
empty?
Empty. Yeah, got a little hole in it. Lucy just sent it to me from Australia. I think it's great.
Wow. And it survived the journey?
It did, yeah. It was wrapped up just in newspaper inside a box, so I'm surprised it survived. It's quite a hard shell, but you wouldn't take chances.
You have another story there.
Yeah, I told Emer I wouldn't use her name. Oops. She'll be all right. A friend of mine, a few friends were renting a house in Letterkenny. The house is still there, an old house, terraced house. And they had a lot of things happen. She would hear knocks. It'd be like the house would be shaking. The whole house could vibrate at times. She had went out, and like there was a lot of them sharing the house, like a couple of girls and then their boyfriends would stay over, things like that. So her room was on top of one of the other girls' bedrooms, and then she said she was going out, and she did go out. And then it was the next day, they said to her, I thought you went out last night. And she was like, I did. And she goes, no, we could hear you banging in the room and making noise all night. So like there was nobody there. It sounded like someone was jumping on the bed. She says that she got like a scratch on her leg. She woke up with a scratch on her leg, but no explanation to how it got there. And one of the other girls, she was just in the kitchen, so she felt something move past her. Wow. And the house was freezing. The house was just old and damp and dank, and there was nothing. They couldn't keep coal in it, and they couldn't keep oil in it, and it was just freezing. Like, they talked to other people who'd lived there as well, and they'd noticed things and noises and things that went bump in the night, and just a general bad atmosphere in the house. Like,
does anyone live in the house now? Do you know?
I don't know. I can take a walk past it someday, I suppose, because it's right up the street. It's let me see, what do you call it? Like, it's just right around the corner from Brenton McGlynn's up there, McClure's Terrace, it's called. Um, she says she seemed to think that this knocking, this 3 knocks, is supposed to be a mockery, a demonic thing. Like, I don't know. I said I didn't hear that. I heard it was more like a warning or a knock from the grave, but
Yeah.
not a bad thing. She thought she's heard that it was a mocking of the Holy Trinity. These 3 knocks, that's what that was. Now I've never heard that before. Have
I've
you?
never heard that either.
It does sound quite superstitious, or like a kind of extreme
Yeah.
religious.
Yeah, I've
I
never.
thought
Mocking.
a good thing, like, because I've never heard, like, as the way what happened to my grandfather. Well, it was like a it helped him to say goodbye to his father, so that can't be a bad thing.
Well, I'd
But
love to hear if anyone else has any other instances of hearing knocking, and whether it was a good thing or a bad thing in those cases. If anyone has any stories, let us know. Other stories.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to wind it up here tonight, because I think we've been rambling on for a long time now tonight. Regina, I hope you're going to come back and join us again, because you're good
I
fun.
would love to. Thank you. I
Yeah, we'll
will.
definitely get you on, say, some night next week if it suits you, and we'll
I'll
have
try and get a photograph of that necklace that I was talking
yeah,
about.
do. And we'll have hopefully a few more stories that we can share with everyone. To everyone that does tune in, thank you very much yet again. And we'll see you all again on Thursday. So listen, thank you very much. So Regina, thank you very much for joining us again. And yeah, thanks
Thanks,
everybody.
darling.
Ben, thank you.
Thanks, Benji.
Good to see everyone. Yeah.